All right, guys, after a weekend that saw in football, the first team in 2 decades to come back from 13 points down with 2 minutes to go or less. We'll talk about the Jets later. A team that eliminated a 21-point deficit in 7 minutes. That's the Dolphins. A team that basically laughed in the face of people popping champagne in the stands in the Las Vegas crowds. That's the Cardinals, ruining the Aces WNBA title. And us getting possibly 2 Hail Marys in the span of 1 hour in college football, and a live fart from Dan Orlovsky on the air just a few hours ago during the Bills-Titans game. This has been a weird weekend of football. Now we talk about it. I'm Steve Rabinowitz.
I'm Jay Kaplan.
I'm Anthony Strait. All this, and this is taking place on the island of relevancy, ladies and gentlemen. This is a great Monday. This is a great Monday night.
Acknowledge this show. Welcome to On the Sports Lines. We will talk the locals, and it's pretty embarrassing, but it's been 6 years that we've been this early with the Giants and Jets picking up a win this early in the season in week 2. So we'll do that. We'll have overreactions from an NFL season that's so crazy so far that you think there was a script involved, and we'll talk college and be nice to the Pac-12 for once. Do we have to?
Yes,
you
do. Yes.
All right, let's sidetrack for un momento for the opener. After a scathing report was released last week about the Phoenix Suns and Mercury owner Robert Sarver and his history of racial statements and workplace harassment, Sarver was hit with a $10 million fine and a 1-year suspension. Players are not happy. LeBron James basically tweeted out that it was bullshit, this whole entire suspension. Sponsors are not happy, who knew PayPal still existed. And really, no one is happy about this suspension to really begin with. So whether it be just the actions, just the consequences, there's a lot of racial undertones. There's a ton of terrible workplace stories. So let's judge the judge without talking about the real judge that we want to talk about in this town named Darren. Anthony, is this Sarver punishment enough?
No, I would say no, but the NBA, I think, kind of had their hands cuffed with this one. And I know people were trying to draw comparisons to the Donald Sterling situation back in 2014, but with that situation, you had a legit smoking gun. Like, you literally had audio evidence of Donald Sterling saying racial remarks towards a couple of NBA legends, Magic Johnson notably. So it was kind of like it pushed the NBA and at one point the owners to kind of act on, okay, we cannot have this guy here. We got to do something about it. In this case, and the reason why I say no, the punishment is not enough, because you look at some of the reports in this 300-plus page report, using the N-word multiple times, body shaming, particularly an employee who was pregnant. He said something lewd and disrespectful towards her. He's made a lot of lewd sex jokes about players on the team. He's bullied his own employees at repeated times. He's basically the behavior and that you get from this is a guy from a place of entitlement. Basically, he did whatever he wanted because he owned the team and no one could basically tell him what to do. The disappointment in this was that the report found all this and it felt dismissive as if, oh, it's just typical frat boy behavior. But when you are the head of a business and you are a representation of the bigger picture, which is the NBA, frat boy behavior should be dismissed like this. And I think back to this, some of the hostile work-life conditions with the Dallas Mavericks also that took place a couple of years ago. It had to be investigated. You do wonder at what can the NBA do? They gave him the maximum fine, a 1-year suspension, and there was reports that even Sarver wasn't even happy with that, even though he's not, at least at the moment, not going to have a seat taken away from him. So 2 things that stands out to me is, number one, the guy's complete ass. I think we can all put that out there, and it clearly he has a thing for all this. There doesn't seem to be an ounce of remorselessness whatsoever, which is the one thing I take away from this. And the second thing that I take away from this is, and you guys are trying to help me out with this one, what else can the league do? Because you think about if the league tried to attempt to solve what they did to Donald Sterling, and there was no real smoking gun. We just have eyewitnesses reports. Could have been possible litigation, lawsuits that could have taken place. And we know the league, and we know a lot of these professional leagues. Obviously, you see with the NFL all the time, but in the NBA, they don't really want to go through things like this if they don't have to. Donald Sterling was kind of a one-time deal. Well, the other owners in the league unanimously voted to remove him from ownership of the Los Angeles Clippers. It was unprecedented, but in this case, we don't see that same unilateral support to remove Sarver from ownership. So I think the league was a little had their hands tied a little bit as how far they could punish him. So obviously the 1 year suspension, a $10 million fine to a billionaire is not really not doing a whole lot when he still owns a team and he's worth billions in the first place. But it leaves a question as far as situations like this, what can the NBA do moving forward to kind of deter this kind of behavior from happening with the other teams also down the line?
Yeah, and that's kind of I'm gonna bring that up in my point, guys. I mean, let me preface this by saying there's absolutely zero place in the country, let alone the NBA, for behavior, attitudes, and actions of someone like Robert Sarver. And while I understand where the outcry comes from folks like LeBron James, like Chris Paul, and like, Tamika Tremaglio, who's the new executive director of the NBA Players Association, saying the NBA didn't levy enough of a punishment. And while I fully believe that Adam Silver completely botched this moment, Anthony, like you, I don't know that the NBA could have done more. Silver was dealt a crappy hand based on the results of the investigation into Sarver conducted for the league by the law firm of Wachtell, Lipton, Rosen, and Katz, and had to, as the Athletic's John Hollinger said in his piece this week, quote, put lipstick on a pig defending an indefensibly light punishment. I mean, my takeaways are as follows. I mean, Silver trying to paint Sarver as remorseful about his comments and behavior and was somehow no longer the person he was being made out to be in the report by saying, quote, I do believe Mr. Sarver clearly has evolved as a person over that 18-year period, and much of that the behavior in question stems from much earlier in his tenure as an NBA owner. That comment had me going, are you kidding me? Really, Adam? The report lists allegations against Sarver starting from when he first took over in 2004 to as recently as last year. Add to that, okay, you got Sarver attacking the story from ESPN's Baxter Holmes that would be largely confirmed by the NBA's investigation, and sources reporting to both Holmes and ESPN NBA insider Adrian Wojnarowski, Woj as we all call him, that, quote, the Suns owner was unaccepting of the idea that he deserved a 1 year suspension and a $10 million fine for his behavior. The punitive part of the process became largely acrimonious. With that and everything else, and you've gone from seeing smoke and wondering if there's a fire to Rhaenyra Targaryen writing it on her dragon and yelling Dracarys. Come on now. I completely agree with the folks who want the NBA to force Sarver to give up his ownership stake. But Anthony, as you said, this isn't Donald Sterling 2.0. Yeah, you got a preponderance of statements by employees of both the Suns and the WNBA's Mercury who are either witnesses to or victims of the hostile workplace that Sarver created and perpetuated. And it's staggering how many there are in that report. As you said, Anthony, there's no smoking gun like there was with Sterling. No audio or videotape with Sarver saying the things he's accused of saying or doing. And because of that, 1 year suspension, $10 million, was as severe as Silver could go based on that aforementioned crappy hand he'd been dealt. Getting Sarver to give up ownership of the Suns and Mercury requires 3/4 of the other owners to vote him out, and most aren't going to jump at the chance to do something that could eventually be used against them down the road. It's just not a precedent they're inclined to set. But Adam Silver can't allow this rap on the knuckles with a ruler be the end of it. What can we do, Anthony? Public pressure from multiple places may help. The fact that, I hope I'm pronouncing this gentleman's name correctly, Jam Najafi, the Suns vice chairman, who has the second largest ownership stake in the team, openly said that Sarver needs to be gone. To me, that's a start. I mean, here's what he said. He, quote, cannot in good judgment sit back and allow our children and future generations of fans think that this behavior is tolerated because of wealth and privilege. That fact that Robert Sarver owns the team does not give him a license to treat others different than any other leader. The fact that anyone would find him fit to lead because of this ownership position is forgetting that NBA teams belong to the communities they serve. He also went on to say that Sarver's conduct would have warranted immediate termination by any CEO, executive director, president, teacher, or coach. And he's right. And Rabbi, you brought up PayPal. They've been the Suns jersey patch sponsor since 2018. They said that they won't renew their contract with the team after this season if Sarver remains part of the franchise. To me, that's also a start. Their president and CEO, Dan Schulman, pulled no punches when he released a statement saying, quote, PayPal is a value-driven community company and it has had a strong record of combating racism, sexism, and all forms of discrimination. We have reviewed the report of the NBA League's independent investigation into Phoenix Suns owner Robert Sarver and found his conduct unacceptable and in conflict with our values, end quote. Here's my hope, guys, that on or before, and hopefully long before, the end of this one-year suspension, Silver figures out a way to at least have Sarver banned from the NBA for life. He did it with Sterling, and it ultimately led to the Clippers being sold, which had the desired result of Donald Sterling no longer being part of the NBA. Same thing needs to happen here. Mr. Najafi's statement is a variation on one I've used on this show over the years when we've done a segment on malfeasance by the owner of a professional sports franchise. Owning an NBA team is not a right. It's a privilege, and that privilege doesn't give Robert Sarver and others like him the hall pass to say and do the things listed in the NBA's report. But unfortunately, most owners across all professional sports often forget that even though they write the checks, they don't really own the team. They're actually stewards of a public trust, and when you violate said public trust, your stewardship needs to be revoked.
Even though half of the owners in the NBA are of minority color or of color, it's still a good old boy league. And one of the hugest problems with look at all of the maximum amount that you could be fined. Yes, there was no smoking gun. Like Donald Sterling had tapes that basically said he was racist. Although I think it's complete bullshit that this stuff was not said basically with amorous, which is meaning he doesn't have a history of being a racist. Yes, he does.
Yes, he
when
does.
you have all of these statements, you are pretty much, you have trouble in your life. But I want to read the quote that Adam Silver said that really started making me mad in the press conference to explain it. There are particular rights here of someone who owns an NBA team as opposed to somebody who is an employee.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. You can't say that in public, though.
No,
you have to be
not
very
that way.
careful with your words. You can't say it that way. That's one of the things that led to this. I think overall, there's a lot of public pressure that can be made, and it has nothing to do with what the vice chairman said and the man who has the second biggest stake. That helps, but money. The Suns are still going to be one of the most exciting teams next year. Do not go to games if you're going to. Support, take your money out of anything that Sarver has to do. Is it sad that the Suns are going to have to take a hit on this? Yes, but the only way for that team to move on to new ownership is to get that money out of the Phoenix franchises. And remember, with all of the statements he made about women and pregnancy, he owns the fucking Mercury as well. So there's a huge problem with a guy who is as misogynistic and borderline racist, but truly racist, as him owning a team. Mm-hmm. And I think overall, I don't think I still think there's a 50-50 chance that this year ends with him leaving, but not necessarily for good things. Remember, when Donald Sterling sold the Clippers, he made money off of that deal. These people do not deserve to make money, but unfortunately, that's the goal to getting them out of the NBA. There's no winners in this thing at all, and it's just how you handle it, and no one's handled it correctly.
Nope.
Let's move on. On to football. And let's start with the successful local teams last week. Successful local teams?
That sounds weird coming out of your mouth, partner.
It is true. The Giants are the first up, and for the first time since 2016. And yes, I have heard the magic words this week of banana boat being mentioned on pregame broadcasts. The J-Men are 2-0. Yes, you read that right. It took a missed field goal at the gun to beat the Titans in week 1 and a made field goal with under 4 minutes left to beat the Panthers in week 2, and another 2 years off of all Giants fans' life. Congratulations, guys. And now, dem boys come in town with America's favorite villain / porn star named Cooper Rush heading the boys with Dak Prescott injured, and they come in at 1-1 after a win at the gun against the Cincinnati Bengals. So we're going to talk about some offensive and defensive things, and then I'll talk about the Cowboys. You know, I really love to talk about the Cowboys. Jay, positive or negative, what offensive thing did you take away with the G-Men offense in week 2?
The thing that stood out for me was just the inconsistency. Giants are one of the most unlikeliest 2-0 teams in the NFL this season. Neither of their wins have been easy, largely due to their offense struggling to find consistency and put more 7s than 3s on the board, something they managed to do in their 21-20 week 1 win over the Titans, but struggled to do in their week 2 win over the Panthers. The game against Carolina was a tale of two halves for the Giants offense. The first half was an exhibition in mediocrity as they managed just 60 total yards and 4 first downs. They had their first 2 drives starting Carolina territory due to turnovers caused by their special teams on the opening kickoff, which gave the Giants offense a 1st and 10 at the Panthers 22, and by their defense, who forced a fumble at the Panthers 40 on the very next series. Both times, the Giants offense was unable to convert in the red zone and had to settle for Graham Gano field goals. In the first half, the Giants offensive line was, offensive. They couldn't open holes for running back Saquon Barkley to run through 5 yards on 3 carries in the first half, or give quarterback Daniel Jones enough time to find open receivers and not get sacked. Jones did go 13 for 17 in the first half, but for a paltry 67 yards, and he was sacked twice. The O-line seemed to have no answer for the speed of the Panthers defense, and it had Jones uncomfortable, which led to some bad decisions and throws, including a near interception by Carolina linebacker Frankie Louvu, went right through his hands on a pass that never should have been thrown in the first place. Jones finished with a clean sheet, no turnovers either in the air or on the ground, and overall he was efficient. 22 of 34. Almost a 65% completion percentage. For the season, he's a little under 71%, 39 of 55. But for the second straight week, he was under 200 yards passing. But whereas last week, he averaged almost 9 yards per his 21 attempts, this week, his yards per attempt was a paltry 5.18 on 34 passes. He led just 1 touchdown drive. That was in the third quarter, taking the Giants 75 yards, going 4 for 6 for 58 yards, finishing things with a 16-yard pass to rookie tight end Daniel Bellinger. I was trading texts with Joe Tafaro during the game, and I told him that what I saw from the offense in the first half was reminiscent of last year's Steelers offense, where the passing game rarely went beyond the line of scrimmage. There was only 1 play of 10-plus yards, and the running game struggled to get positive yards, as I previously noted. Barkley did finish with 72 yards on 21 carries, 3.4 a pop. And he did rebound from that paltry first half with 67 yards on 18 carries in the second half. It's a slightly better 3.7 yards per carry, but nowhere near close to the 164 rushing yards he had in week 1. Yes, the Giants are 2-0 for the first time since 2016, as the rabbi noted at the top. Yes, they gave my nephew Connor a win for his birthday in his first ever trip to an NFL stadium. And yes, they won a pair of games they very likely would have lost under Joe Judge, who coached not to lose, whereas Brian Dable is coaching to win. They've done it with a defense that's playing Wink Martindale's scheme to the best of its ability, minus their top 2 pass rushers, and a kicker who can't seem to miss no matter what the distance is. It's not a bad formula, but it will take you only so far. At some point, your offense needs to drive down the field consistently and convert red zone opportunities into touchdowns. Jones, Barkley, and the revolving door of receivers are not there yet. But if they can somehow manage to do it Monday night against the Cowboys defense that dominated Joe Burrow and the Bengals, it'll be a huge step in the right direction.
Yeah, I do think the wide receivers, though, are a huge misstep. Like, you see a guy named Sills the third, and it's not even Kenny Sills. So you're like, why am I? That's a problem, because I think it just kind of hamstrings Jones, and that kind of hamstrings Barkley, because you don't really give Jones any respect. That's no insult to Jones, but if there's nobody open, you can't throw to them, obviously.
No, but what's going to be interesting to see for me, Rabbi, is, and I know Brian Dable is doing this based on matchups and based on who they're playing and who's the best fit for the, the defense they're going to see and what types of coverages they're prone to run. But at some point, I wonder if, Kenny Golladay and his big contract, which as we all know, he hasn't lived up to, not getting on the field, for more than 2 snaps, for Kadarius Toney, not getting inconsistent playing time. If you're going to get to a point where, other than Sterling Shepard, who's the only wide receiver who's gotten consistent playing time, and that's because we all know about, his connection with Jones, you start the egos on people like Golladay and Toney start to cause a problem in the locker room when they're not getting what they feel are the amount of snaps they should be getting. It's something to watch out for.
Well, Toney did get that addressed in week 1 and vehemently did a very good job basically saying, why would I criticize anything after a win? Golladay was told before the game, essentially, you're not going to be a part of the offense today. So that's going to be something. That's going to be something to watch going forward. It doesn't fit with Daboll's scheme, possibly, because those two are inconsistent enough in what Daboll wants to do. But it does bear watching because you can win with no names out there, but you can't be consistent with a wide receiving core of really no names out there. It's just not sustainable. Anthony, Jay, back about 17 minutes ago, mentioned the defense having those injuries, but looking better than ever in the pass rush. And that's what you're looking for as what turns out to be a positive from that week 2 win.
Yeah, you know what? For the second week in a row, the start of the show was the Giants defense. You think about last week against Tennessee, how they really shut down the offense in the second half and kind of allowed the Giants to really get back in that game. This week, Wink Martindale didn't have Thibodeau, didn't have Ojolari for a second week in a row, and also lost Leonard Williams in the game, also in the first half of that game, of yesterday's game also. But he started. It was funny because he started the game with a big front, defensive front with 5 linemen and two linebackers. He really mixed and matched his defense. He went to 6.
Anthony, actually, 1 linebacker, and he actually played 3 safeties. He had 1 safety playing as a linebacker. So
it's David McKinney.
It was a 3 safety alignment, which was weird for him.
Yeah, it's like it was the first time in his career that he was actually used as a hybrid. I think about that. I think about the Legion of Boom defense in Seattle, where they used to use those safeties in a kind of hybrid linebacker mode. But you think about this, he wanted to put more speed, obviously, to compensate for Christian McCaffrey. And McCaffrey had 128 total yards, but kept him out of the end zone. The big thing was the pass rush and the fact that he was able to bring pressure. Even when he wasn't getting hit home, he was able to make Baker Mayfield uncomfortable. It resulted in 145 yards passing and just under 50% completion percentage. DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson combined for only 6 receptions. Obviously, DJ Moore caught the touchdown pass in the second quarter. But outside of that, really didn't do a whole lot in the game. But here's a stat that sticks out to me, and I think back to last season when the Giants had a hard time getting off the field on third down. Through 2 games, the Giants have only allowed 5 third downs on 23 third down attempts, which is 21%, and that's the best in the National Football League through the 2 games. And a game ball has to go to Julian Love because 8 tackles, all solo tackles, 2 for a loss, and he had the big sack late in the game on Baker Mayfield. That kind of
it was their last. It was basically Carolina's last offensive play in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, kind of snuffed out their last chance to kind of at least tie or even win the game. But the Giants' defense has been exceptional the first 2 games. Martin has done a great job of mixing up his defenses, knowing when to bring the pressure. And there's been times when he's bringing them from all over the place. That's kind of something we saw in Baltimore. And obviously, if you saw the Dolphins-Ravens finish, there's something missing there in that Ravens defense. But just seeing how good this team has been the first 2 games, I can't wait to see what happens when they get the defensive pass rushers back. Yeah. I mean, when you ever have 2 two bookend pass rushers on each end that can force the quarterback up into pressure. Hopefully, Leonard Williams is not going to be lost for a extended period of time. I think this Giant defense is going to be can have the potential to be one of the best teams in the NFL, best defensive units in the NFL. They may have to because the offense is going to be inconsistent. It's going to be it could be an uphill climb if the other side of football is not doing a whole lot. But talk about the Jets more in the next segment. But we kind of see that
you can't win games in the 20s.
No,
very simple. You can't consistently win games in the 20s. You can make the playoffs at games in the 20s, but you can't actually get any farther with playing consistently games.
The last Giants team that made the playoffs routinely beat teams by scoring in the 20s. Remember
That's
that?
true.
That's
actually they didn't. They barely got into the 20s last week because of the 2-point conversion to get them to 21.
There you go. Anthony, you said something interesting, and it's been interesting to me is that Martindale came in with this reputation of throwing the kitchen sink, blitzing, and coming at everybody all day long. And it's interesting to me that he has kind of adjusted and adapted to the personnel that the Giants have or don't have. And he recognizes that, there are certain situations where he doesn't need to throw kitchen sink blitzes to get pressure on the quarterback. He's recognized that he may need to tone it down because the Giants secondary, not necessarily as good man-to-man coverage as he had in Baltimore, especially, with Robinson getting hurt and, and Cordell Flott has not actually, is still a rookie. But, you give him credit for kind of adjusting and, not pulling a Greg Williams and going, my scheme, and the hell with whoever he's got around him. So I give Martindale credit for that.
Well, the good thing is for the Giants, their next two quarterbacks they're facing are Cooper Rush and Justin Fields, people who, Rush looked good yesterday, but he's not going to have the same pressure that he's going to have on Monday night. And that's a little bit different because Baker Mayfield and Ryan Tannehill, if you watch Monday Night Football tonight with Buffalo, Ryan Tannehill has lost a little bit off of his fastball, and Baker Mayfield has also lost a little bit off of his fastball. All right, quickly, I think Tony Pollard is the guy to watch for the Cowboys, and next week, pretty interesting Monday night game, and a game I don't think anyone would have circled, and now it's actually pretty interesting, especially for the fact that the Giants might be able to go 3-0. 13 touches overall yesterday, 9 rushing attempts, and 4 receptions for 55 yards, along with 1 touchdown. Pollard has always been the guy to spell Ezekiel Elliott, who it seems like he's been in the league forever, but he's only in year number 7, I believe. But I think you still have this sort of thunder and lightning combo over here because Pollard is younger, Pollard is faster, and Pollard can probably do more on both sides of the ball than Elliott can. I think, considering I'm pretty sure Michael Gallup is not going to return for this game against, if he is, that'll be a big help.
Don't be too sure. He's progressing nicely. He may be available. It'll probably be a game time decision.
Yeah, even if it's a game time decision, you're still want to bring him back into the offense. Yeah, it's a possible against next week against the Giants, but you still want to bring him back into the offense. So you're still going to be using the weapons that you have. I know CeeDee Lamb actually did have a good game yesterday, a little bit better, getting some separation from receivers like a number 1 wide receiver should do, which he did not do at all against Tampa Bay, even when Dak Prescott was there. But Pollard for me is the key. He changes the game tempo wise, and as a guy who is almost a second option on running and almost a third or fourth option on receiving, if you get him to do different things, you might get to have the Giants kind of get a little bit more confused on defense. Again, this is probably another 20-17 Giants special that they seem to put together lately, because Cooper Rush is 2-0 as a starter, and Cooper Rush has performed admirably. Hasn't performed great. He doesn't have the legs that Dak Prescott does, so he's not multifaceted, but he gets the job done. He will be facing, though, a much better defense in week number 3, and I'm very curious to see how that is going to affect the team. Giants have a lot of pressure on them in this game just because of the fact that they want to continue this start, and it's big game to get something over Dallas.
Yeah, it's Dallas. It's Monday Night
Pressure's
Football.
going to come from Micah Parsons.
Oh yeah.
And see, the thing about Micah Parsons is he's almost a known now. He was almost living in the backfield yesterday for Joe Burrow, but Jesus Christ, but I do think the Giants' offensive line is just a little bit better than the Bengals' offensive line. Like I said,
bar. Rabbi, after yesterday, that's a low bar to clear. As far as
I said little. I didn't say yes. Of course, it's a little low bar to clear, but you can't do any worse than the Bengals' offensive line has done the last few weeks. All right, want to move on to the other team out there because, Jesus, the Jets' opening day loss to the Ravens was a bend and eventually break type of game. I don't know how the hell you explain the game against the Browns. I mentioned it due to some very good Joe Flacco offense, which we'll talk about in a second, shoddy defense, and one great running back forgetting that it's okay to not score a TD because that means your team wins. I know the Cleveland Browns aren't used to winning, but that's 2-0. It's a 2-game winning streak. It has happened before. Anyway, the Jets became the first team in 21 years to come back from 2 TDs down 13 points in less than 2 minutes to get their first dub in 2022, a 31-30 win over the Cleveland Browns. I'm assuming Anthony was, by the way, fist pumping at the Mets making the playoffs. Am I correct?
Yes, we are. Yes, in 2022, we are officially a playoff team. First time in 6 years.
And don't forget, by the way, Cleveland.
Yeah, I let him win tonight too. So we're still a pennant race.
We'll talk about that.
We'll
and then don't forget, by the way, in that game, Cleveland also missed an extra point, so extra points do matter.
Yeah.
You didn't think when the Cincinnati Bengals came into MetLife for week 3 that they would be the one looking to get off the schneid, but here we are. All right, Jay. The Jets haven't really missed too much with Zach Wilson out, at least in this week 2 game. Joe Flacco, what a performance. He's your offensive takeaway.
Yeah. I mean, he was the thing that stood out the most for me. I mean, while it was nice to see, rookie first round pick Garrett Wilson from Ohio State put up the type of game everyone was envisioning from him, 14 targets, 8 catches, 102 yards, and 2 scores, including the 15-yard game winner with 22 seconds left. But the thing that, as I said, the thing that stood out the most for me for the Jets offense was Joe Flacco, the 37-year-old veteran quarterback who has an 18-3 record against the Browns. Shrugged off the fan base calling for Mike White after last week's 24-9 loss to the Ravens and reached back into his past to pull up a Joe Cool performance worthy of his heyday with those Ravens. Flacco went 26 of 44 for 307 yards, 4 touchdowns, including 2 in the final, 155. 0 picks and a 110.7 passer rating, leading the Jets back from 13 down to steal this win on the road. In doing so, he helped the Jets do something they hadn't done in 13 tries. Win in September years, as the rabbi said, overcoming a 13-point deficit in the last 2 minutes of a game to win. The first of those 2 touchdown passes was a 66-yarder to Corey Davis, who was so wide open due to a coverage miscommunication by the Browns that if you hadn't witnessed it, you would not have believed it.
I witnessed it, and I still don't believe it.
There you go.
I'm asking you what happened on that play.
There you go. It was the second play of the drive, and it pulled the Jets within 6, taking only 33 seconds off the clock. Miraculously, the Jets recovered the onside kick, a rarity these days in the NFL, and Flacco had 1:20 and 53 yards to go. First pass was incomplete, but after that, he just carved up the Browns. 12 yards to running back Michael Carter, 4 yards to tight end Tyler Conklin. Carter again for 5, incomplete to Ty Johnson, then 12 yards to Wilson, incomplete to Elijah Moore, a throwaway, and then he found Wilson in the end zone from 12 yards out. Caroline's extra point made it official. Now, while Flacco's performance may have seemed surprising to the current generation of Jets fans, it's quite familiar to Steelers fans like me who painfully remember Flacco doing it to our team during his time as QB1 in Baltimore. Jets head coach Robert Sarver said post-game that Flacco was, quote, just a calming force. He's been in a lot of these situations. He was cool and calm, got the ball where it needed to go, and left the door open just a crack, and that was enough for our guys to break through, end quote. The Jets are 1-1 with their next 2 games coming against a pair of AFC North teams, the Bengals and the Steelers, both of whom are struggling on offense, that look more winnable now than they did at the start of the season, especially if Flacco keeps playing like this.
Yeah, and I know week one, a lot of people criticized the fact that Joe Flacco threw 59 times. He kind of had to in that situation,
Yep.
especially with a good rushing game. Now that Carter had a pretty good week one going for a decent amount, and Breece Hall followed that up with a pretty good week two. Jets have weapons, I think, and I think you guys said it perfectly. It'll be very interesting what'll happen when Zach Wilson is back, because it seems like Joe Flacco, and yes, even for a moment last year, Mike White, found Mike LaFleur's offense pretty pick-upable, something that Wilson hasn't really been able to do with his skill set, Jay. And it's very interesting to see a guy like Flacco kind of be comfortable in the pocket. Hasn't really been touched in these first few games. I know Baltimore did a better job rushing, but this Cleveland game, you would think Myles Garrett would have been living in that backfield.
Well, he did have, I believe he did have one sack,
from last year's injury, where Flacco, Mike White, Flacco, Mike White, and Johnson, basically, ran LaFleur's offense the way it was intended to be run. The key thing for Zach Wilson is recognizing that he doesn't always have to make the big flashy play.
Well, it's also the fact that he doesn't know how to do anything other than that, though.
Right, and that's a mindset.
Knows how to do.
Right, and that's a mindset we kind of hoped that he would have recognized watching from the bench last year, and kind of just went along with that. He didn't. Here's hoping it's been coached out of him in training camp and exhibition season, and coming in when he finally does take over the reins, that that instinct has, if not necessarily completely been drilled out of him, at least it's been tempered. He needs to learn, to use the old lyric, Kenny Rogers song lyric, got to know when to hold them, got to know when to fold them, got to know when to walk away. And in Wilson's case, you got to know when to run like hell to get away from the pass rushers.
But again, like I said, that's become offensive line has actually not done a bad job so far.
No, they haven't. And that's not something we would have predicted coming into the season.
Very surprising considering people lost both of their left tackles. All right, enough about this. Anthony, it's time to be negative again. If it were not for that Browns choke, we would have noticed that defensive lack of effort was
the defense,
especially towards Nick Chubb.
Yeah, the defense is pretty overmatched yesterday. I gave the Jets defense a lot of credit last week for hanging in there and really trying to keep the Jets in the game as much as possible. Just the offense didn't do anything for most of the afternoon. And obviously, when you bend and don't break in the NFL, eventually you will break. But yesterday, the Browns just had to win with them. 405 total yards. Jacoby Brissett, he only threw for 229 yards, threw a touchdown. But then you look at Nick Chubb, 17 carries and 87 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, and obviously the third one he scored, a bit of a debatable one. Maybe he should have went down and he could have ran out the clock with the Jets not having any timeout. But then you look at Amari Cooper, had 9 catches, 100 yards, and a touchdown also. But the Browns had 4 drives of 60 or more yards that resulted in points. And by the time the fourth quarter came around, the Jets defense they looked tired, they looked gassed. Like they just can't get off the field soon enough. But they did hang in there. They were able to at least slow down Cleveland just enough to at least allow for the comeback to happen. Trust me, a lot of things had to happen for the Jets to walk away with a win. Most of it at the Cleveland Browns' own miscues. But look at the Jets defense, and this is the thing with Robert Sarver we've seen. It's growing pains. I mean, they're a bit inconsistent. The offense didn't do much last week. The defense struggled for most of the afternoon in yesterday's game. They did get the game-winning interception at the end that completed a miraculous comeback. But you just wonder if they can just how good this team could be if they can get together 4 solid quarters of football on both sides of the football, and the special teams even chipped in that onside kick to get the ball back.
Let me mention that before. You don't see a lot of people doing the move to the right, fake it to the left move better than that, and it was perfectly executed. And you do feel like sometimes the karma gods come to get you, and the karma gods were ready and willing able yesterday.
Yeah,
always been one for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, one of my friends at work is a Jets fan, and I told him it doesn't quite make up for Mark Gasol getting called for a late hit in 1986, but it's a somewhat of a consolation prize, okay? But look, the Jets defense, particularly the secondary, I mean, they just really had a rough day. Even Sauce Gardner left the game briefly, got dinged up a little bit. Got very lucky that a touchdown was actually called out of bounds on him. I mean, this defense, like I said, they played great last week. They struggled this week. Look at this Jet team. They have talent. There's talent there. Can they put 4 quarters of football together, a complete football together? I think it could be it could be a competitive team. They're able to do that. We saw that in small bashes last year, particularly against Tennessee at home. And against Cincinnati, the opponent this week, can the defense do that? Especially now when you see a Bengals team coming in, you can't protect anybody.
No, and let's actually get right to that point right now. Last year, by the way, this was the Mike White famous game in week number 9. And
I was a witness.
Was a witness to the one and only Mike White. Cincinnati, if Cleveland had game breakers like Amari Cooper and Nick Chubb, you're going to get better ones next week in probably one of the best 1-2 combos in football in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, Joe Mixon running the football. But it all doesn't matter unless Joe Burrow can get the ball to him. And Burrow has been very unlucky playing a relatively healthy for most of the game TJ Watt in week number 1, where TJ Watt played like the best defensive player on earth, including an interception. That Burrow had a terrible game in week 1, really throwing some terrible passes, especially making plays when he really shouldn't have. But TJ Watt was pretty much the best defensive player on earth, and he thought he caught a break. And then yesterday, Joe Burrow found Micah Parsons, the second best defensive player on earth, basically being in his grill the entire game. But needless to say, with all the offseason additions, including La'el Collins of the Cowboys, you would think the team, Joe Burrow, who basically got carried like crazy in the second half of Super Bowl 56 and also got knocked down 7 times against the Tennessee Titans in a wildcard game, still won that game, by the way. You would think that everything would be kumbaya. You would spend 100 picks on the offensive line. Been sacked 13 times this year. Next up on that list of quarterbacks that have been sacked is Matt Ryan with 7. So it is a little bit of a disparity. Teams have known that you can run simple blitzes against this team and you'll get through to Joe Burrow. And that was also what happened in year 1. There was even people who said that he shouldn't even have played last season because of the amount of time that he was basically going to be on his back because the offensive line was basically the baddest.
David Carr level, man.
This is getting worse than David Carr level because he's gonna. If this continues, he's going to end up injured. Needless to say, must-win game for Cincinnati. And if Joe Burrow stays upright, he can do the job. He needs to be careful with his throws, and he needs to be more meticulous with his throws. Yes, he has 2 of the best players out there in football, but you can check it down to Joe Mixon half of the time. And T. Higgins and Jamar Chase are not going to catch all of the balls if there's a defender in your face every 5 minutes. So Burrow leads this team to victory, or the offensive line crumbles this team in defeat. Going to be very interesting to see the Jets and Bengals in week number 2.
Rabbi, I got to tell you, as much as, you know how much I love good quarterback play. So I'd like to see Burrow rebound only because I like the way the kid plays the game. The matchup that I'm really intrigued to see, and I don't know how much it's going to happen based on, matchups and schemes and all that, but I would love to see how often Chase lines up opposite Sauce Gardner, and how often the Bengals look to try and see if the rookie can live up to the hype.
It just seems to be like Sauce did not have a great game too. Again, injuries had a little bit of a part of it, but he had a very, very good week 1. It was just in the end, you stay on the field in that game against Baltimore for 35, 40 minutes, you're eventually going to break, and they did. But Jets have been a little bit surprising so far. Too bad that division is all pretty decent, so it's not going to be as good as that. All right. By the way, the Bengals were my Super Bowl pick.
Yeah, that's right, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. The Bills were not my Super Bowl pick, and look what they're doing. All right, sports feeds on the overreaction. They feed off it so much. The NFL is pretty much the leader in that. We're not even 1/8 done through this season, but some fans are ridiculous in their expectations and in their disappointments. And shockingly, New York is not on that list. So it's our job tonight to agree or disagree with you, as we're going to give you some overreactions that we think are bullshit or that have been proven bullshit. Anthony, let's talk about Geno Smith. You want to just pour on the people of Seattle some more, don't you?
Yeah, I can start with there's so many outrageous hot takes the last 24, 48 hours, but I'm gonna go with the Pacific Northwest on this one. And look, Seattle with a great win against a Denver team that went to the Mike McCarthy School of Clock Management in the fourth quarter. As far as game winning drives,
no. It's not the Mike McCarthy School of Clock Management anymore. If your crowd has to count down the play clock for you, it's
Oh my God! Right, I saw that.
Yes, that happened, by the way.
They had a ceremony earlier this week.
Yeah, that did happen, and it was shown on NFL Red Zone, which is hilarious. But look, Geno Smith in the first half, he came out firing. He looked like a new man. Seattle's offense hasn't done much since, and that's the thing too. They really haven't done anything in the last 6 quarters, believe it or not. Geno Smith was riding high. He was, he had the great quote after the game. They tried to write me off. I didn't write back, but apparently the 49ers got the message and reminded him that he is Geno Smith. Look, he got dinged around. The offense has really been struggling. They've been outgained by 806 to 469 in 2 games. This is let me see if I can find this back. I was just looking at it. My cat distracted me. But this is the offensive production yesterday. Fumble, punt, interception, and a half, punt, end of game. That is literally the Seattle Seahawks offense in week 2 against San Francisco. They have not done anything in 6 quarters. By the way, that defense took a hit with Jamal Adams not being done for the season. And there was and I don't understand the play calling too, because if you're going to be a run first offense, I don't know if having Geno Smith throwing a ball on first and second down on every possession is a great idea. I mean, granted, it would be encouraging if Geno Smith wasn't a game manager, but that's what he is right now. So I'm kind of scratching my head over it. And look, they're in a division where the Rams are still the Rams. The 49ers, who seem like, and best wishes to trade Lance and his speedy recovery, but they seem like they just got revitalized with Jimmy Garoppolo being back in the field all of a sudden.
How ironic.
Yeah, the irony in that. And
Spoiler alert!
And you look at the Seahawks right now, it's going to be a long season. You can't throw the ball 59 times and call yourself a run first offense when you've only ran the ball 33 times in 2 games. It's a mess right now what's going on in Seattle. But the overreaction from week 1 to week 2 clearly doesn't compensate for the fact that this is going to be a really bad Seahawks team this season.
And this is why I said to you guys all throughout the summer, I cannot believe that the Seattle Seahawks are willing to go into this season with Geno Smith as QB1.
Because they're not trying, because it's not about winning this year for them. It's about finding everybody else being developed and then tanking to probably get one of the quarterbacks that are coming out of college. For God's sakes, if Alabama quarterbacks are the new thing, as we've seen Tua throw for 500 freaking yards and Jalen Hurts look like Lamar Jackson 2.0, but improved with better receivers, maybe they want Bryce Young. I don't freaking know right now, but Jesus Christ. Okay. By the way, I have some honorable mentions on my list coming up when I mention mine. But Jay.
Yeah.
Jimmy Garoppolo was mentioned, and the spoiler alert leads to the revitalization in San Francisco. Maybe.
Yeah, I'm gonna hop in the car and take the Pacific Coast Highway down from Seattle to the city by the bay. You guys remember all of those 49er fans and talking heads who said Trey Lance is the next great San Francisco 49er quarterback. We don't need Jimmy G. We should get out.
This is more John Lynch and the management than anything else than talking heads.
Oh, no. They're, you know what? And all I have to say to any of those fans and talking heads who kept perpetuating this hot take is, how you liking Jimmy G now? As someone who played the position, albeit a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I hate to see any quarterback go down and be lost for the year with an injury like Lance did with his broken ankle. But I have to say, I have always felt that Kyle Shanahan was way too high on Lance, way too soon. The kid had a single year as a starting quarterback in college, and his level of competition that he faced was decidedly of the non-Power 5 variety and was way too fast in handing the keys to the offense. I'm not saying this needed to be a Jordan Love situation. Jimmy G is never going to be confused with Aaron Rodgers. But part of me wonders if Shanahan and GM John Lynch let the noise of the Twitterverse and their constant complaining about all the things that Jimmy G could not do play a part in this rush to start the Trey Lance era. The 49ers are not in the same place as, say, the Bears, who were a rebuild already in place. So playing a young quarterback who would make young quarterback mistakes wasn't going to kill a season. The 49ers have an elite level defense and a solid running game. So to risk a season with playoff potential this soon wasn't something I was big on. 49ers Nation should be on their collective knees thanking the football gods that Jimmy G decided to return to the team, even if it meant being the backup. Everyone, and by that, I mean the aforementioned fans and talking heads, tried to paint Garoppolo's return as a locker room dividing event waiting to happen. No one on the inside of that locker room saw things that way. Garoppolo was what he's always been, the consummate professional and teammate. And this quote is proof. Garoppolo said this: "It felt good to be back out there. I feel terrible for Trey. I've been on that side. This league is tough. Everyone has their share of injuries, but that sucks for anyone. I feel bad for him, but he's our brother. We'll pick him up. Trey's a tough dude. He'll be all right." End quote. Those of us who watched the New York football teams last season saw the difference between having a competent QB2, the Jets, and not having one, the Giants. So we understand how important the position is. Say what you want about Garoppolo, but any member of 49er Nation who says they'd rather have Nate Sudfeld or rookie pants to see if they're on fire, or look in the mirror and check the size of their nose. Jimmy G did what he's always done for the 49ers, make the right decisions with the ball and lead the team to a win. 13 of 21, 154 yards. It's a little over 7 yards per attempt. 1 TD, no picks, a 100-plus passer rating, and for good measure, he sealed the 27-7 victory with a 1-yard quarterback sneak with 1:51 left in the game. 49ers did what they've always done with Jimmy G as their quarterback: grind opponents to dust with their running game, which on Sunday was done to the tune of 184 yards on 45 attempts, a little over 4 yards a pop, and shut down opponents with that aforementioned elite defense, led by 2 sacks from Nick Bosa and 2 interceptions from their secondary. Is Garoppolo limited in some ways? Yes. Like I said, he's never going to be confused with Aaron Rodgers. Will he throw the occasional maddening interception? Yes. But are the 49ers still a playoff contender despite their number one quarterback being out for the season? Yes, because the football gods smiled on the 49ers and decided not to allow Jimmy G to be run out of town on a rail. Can't wait for we're Super Bowl contenders now with Jimmy G at quarterback overreactions from those same hypocrites who wanted him gone.
I do think that I said before, and I'm not going to argue with the San Francisco. I do think the San Francisco fans were very split on Trey Lance, and I do appreciate a little bit on an ownership trying to at least build for. It's hard to be in that position of, we have this player for the future and we're ready to make a run. It's hard to do that.
Yeah, it's hard to walk that line. I'm not going to argue that.
But I will say this. Jimmy G did not choose to come back. They did not cut him or trade him. And it was actually said very well by Chris Collinsworth last night when I was listening to a post-game preview, because they're on Sunday Football next week. Usually you keep a quarterback like this when a big injury happens to your star quarterback and you need a quarterback to come in and fill for him, and that's when you're going to get the best trade value. Fortunately for the San Francisco 49ers, the quarterback that they needed to fill was their own spot. And that's why we're in this position, as Anthony is going to try to reconnect here. But
All right.
I can now talk about some of my honorable mentions before I get to my picks. I want to honorable mention the terrible AFC West combo of the Broncos and the Raiders. Raiders blowing a 26-10 lead, and yes, they lost a tough game to the Chargers in week 1, but blowing a lead where they had every little bit of momentum going in a 20-0 game. Kyler Murray scattering, and then Kyler Murray basically taking 85 yards to throw a 2-point conversion at the end of the game.
Right?
The Raiders defense has a lot of problems, and I said on this show, Josh McDaniels is the head coach, and he did not have a successful stint in Denver, and that might be coming true again. For Denver, it's a fucking mess. I know they lost Tim Patrick yesterday, and I know they lost Jerry Jeudy for portions due to injury, but Russell Wilson was at one point of that game against Houston. 6 for 20. And again,
Wilson was exposed.
And you cannot have a worse first 2 weeks as a job as a head coach than Nathaniel Hackett did. There are points, there are decisions that he made that are his own fault, but his clock management has been terrible. Again, the Denver crowd counted down like it was a Giannis Antetokounmpo free throw during the 2021 NBA Finals, and to let him know what was going on. Terrible start for Mr. Hackett, Nate Hackett, Nathaniel Hackett. Luckily, he's 1-1. But the winner,
Rabbi, it's funny. Like I went looking for the stat that I read in Mike Sando's Pick 6 column in The Athletic this week. And what's been interesting is Russell Wilson. It's amazing how much he struggles against certain zone defenses because he wants to so badly make a big play instead of taking what the defense gives him when big plays are not available. And it seems like the Vic Fangio proteges that are around the league. I mean, you had Clint Hurt and Sean Desai in Seattle and Houston. You got a defensive guy in Lovie Smith. And it's interesting to say that Wilson's a very good player, but he doesn't play well when he can't quickly identify the zone
and he also
that he's facing. And what you're going to start to see is there was tape on this his last year in Seattle,
last 2 years in Seattle, really that last year,
right? Yeah, and you're starting to see it more and more. And that's the thing is there's now defensive coordinators know that Russell Wilson has the football equivalent of a hole in his swing, and they're going to exploit the hell out of it.
Plus, he's older, and that doesn't help too. Having a 32 years old, sometimes with the amount of miles and tread he's had, doesn't really help. And he doesn't have a slot guy, which is also a big
and he, and like you said, he no longer has the skill set to those checks that he was able to cash when he was 25. He can't cash anymore, and defenses now know it.
But the winner of this conversation of overreaction is the Indianapolis Colts are a playoff team, because my God, they are not. You can, as much as this is a shock to me, as I want to say it. The Houston Texans and Jacksonville Jaguars were their first two opponents this season. 2-0 needs to be the standard when you're doing that, Anthony. And I tell you what, the game that he had in the first few quarters against Houston, it got helped by a very good fourth quarter, coming back to tie that game 20-20. Outstanding stuff in that last quarter, but Houston did a lot of missing of field goals to give away that game. And then yesterday, you lose that final game of the season last year to Jacksonville, and your owner basically says it's all Carson Wentz's fault. It's all Carson Wentz's fault. All we need is a quarterback upgrade. Yes, I know Michael Pittman was out yesterday, who was really
that didn't help
yesterday. No.
But
you lost that game 24-0. Your defense looked terrible. You made Trevor Lawrence probably have his best game as a pro. You couldn't stop Christian Kirk, who had 2 touchdowns. You couldn't stop any running. James Robinson and Travis Etienne looked like a pretty damn good 1-2 combo. And yes, I know Jacksonville is better. You can't get any worse than what they did last year. And Doug Peterson is doing a good job bringing a system over, and you have a lot of talent there. But again, if you get rid of a quarterback and you say he was your only thing that led you to lose that playoff game, and you lose that game by 14 by 24-0, and you score nothing in the entire game, you immediately deserve all the shit. Sorry, I'm being cursing a lot more tonight. Being thrown on your grave. And so, and I do have to say this, if you look at 3 of the 4 quarters that Carson Wentz has had in Washington, he looks a lot better with the same quality, maybe a little better receivers. And the problem wasn't Carson Wentz, Indianapolis. It's Frank Reich, the guy who should be the first coach fired in the National Football.
No, okay, Anthony, there's an overreaction that we're gonna have to see if that plays out. Rabbi kind of put it out there.
I did. I think if that keeps going, especially they have the Chiefs next week. Good luck.
Yeah, good luck.
I think there's a possibility.
I gotta tell you, and you know, I talked about the Colts on our preview show, and I thought that they were going to be much improved. Yeah, Michael Pittman being out didn't help, but I got to tell you this. The offensive line play of the Indianapolis Colts had to have been hands down, second worst, only to the Bengals this past week.
Nelson just got a fucking contract extension.
Well, look, it surprised the hell out of me. There's no way I would have said that offensive line would have allowed Matt Ryan to be sacked 7 times and basically be the reason Jonathan Taylor could do absolutely nothing with the football.
7 times. That's 7 times in 2 games, by the way, that he's been sacked. So it's probably like more. It was like I think it was 5 times yesterday. But Taylor did nothing. Taylor almost doesn't. And it doesn't look like what it won. He had 156 yards in game 1, but this is
there is something about Duval County, man. The Colts just they leave their game in Indy.
I will say this though: if there's something about Duval County when that team is bad, that Jacksonville team again, the way it looks right now,
they're trending upward.
No, they're probably winning the AFC South. The way it looks right now after 2 weeks, because that might be an overreaction, but it looks bad right now.
Yeah, that division's wide open right now.
Very wide open.
Any of them.
Even the Texans, because they actually defensively, Lovie Smith actually did a good job with them over the first few weeks.
And Davis Mills is a serviceable NFL quarterback, guys.
Serviceable, yes. We'll see, but we have a long way to go in NFL. We also have a long way to go in college football, but we are 4 weeks into that. And college football, where the Sun Belt has reigned king due to multiple upsets.
App State, baby.
Notre Dame, App State, Marshall, who is the Sun Belt team, who I just found out. Notre Dame. Notre Dame also was a failed Hail Mary away from Marcus Freeman being 0-4 as a head coach. And Scott Frost might have regretted jumping to the Big Ten in Nebraska instead of saying with a championship program with a very, very rich history like UCF. Yep. Now, as Anthony is right here, what are your takeaways from the first 4 weeks of college football, Mr. Strait?
Well, this guy goes to the Big Ten, and something Penn State could be a factor in the conference. And you look at the division. They're 3-0. They got on 2 of the most difficult games they've already played. I mean, they had that thrilling come from behind win in Purdue on national television, and they just beat the brakes off of Auburn a couple of days ago. They pretty much dominated that game. I mean, James Franklin with a young team and with at least a lot of people predicted to be kind of a rebuilding, retooling year for a program that finished 7-5 a couple of years ago and finished a couple of games under 500 last season. To be 3-0 now, and then you think about they have 2 home games coming up that I guess are 2 very winnable games coming up against Central Michigan and Northwestern at home. Then they get a bye week, and here where things get interesting if you're Penn State. You at Michigan October 15th. Then a couple weeks after that, you are at home against Ohio State. Then when you get the Big Ten East, they're 3. Like it's literally the entire division outside of Michigan State is 3-0. So this has been kind of a surprising start when you think about our college football show, and we talked about Michigan and Ohio State kind of being the 2 teams that could kind of be part of that college football playoff mix. But Penn State has done a great job. Sean Clifford close to 700 yards passing. Obviously, been a great quarterback in the first 3 games. The freshman running back, Nicholas Singleton, had a big game against Auburn, kind of giving him a nice 1-2 combination. He's leading the team in rushing yards, and the defense has done a tremendous job also. Manny Diaz, the defensive coordinator, has done a great job with that too. So it's going to be interesting to see just how good this team can be. But then you look at the fact that they can literally play a minute, being a minute impact player in the Big Ten Conference, and perhaps maybe build on their own possible bowl game college football playoff expectations. Well, they won't have expectations, but the aspirations, to say the least. It's kind of surprising because you think about this: if Penn State trips up in any of those 3 games, particularly in Purdue, we're not having this conversation right now. Now we're looking at a situation where there are literally, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 7 teams in the Big Ten Eastern Division that are 3-0 right now, and Penn State and Indiana are really the only 2 teams that have played a conference game so far. So the Big Ten might be a fun conference, not named the SEC, or the Pac-12 to watch as the season progresses.
Well, the East is the West. Woof is really to say. Nebraska's terrible. Purdue has had a bad loss. Wisconsin has already lost at home to Oregon State. Northwestern hasn't won a game in the contiguous 48 states. They've won in Ireland. Minnesota is 3-0, and Iowa's 2-1. And I know Michigan goes over there in like a week or 2, but Iowa's offense didn't score a touchdown for the first 2 weeks of the season, and they played North Dakota State or South Dakota State, I think, in week number 1. So once again, the East is really outshining the West this year, and that's not really the biggest thing.
Rutgers is 3-0. How about that?
Rutgers is 3-0. Yeah, I do think one of the things I have noticed it. At least I noticed it in the Ohio State Notre Dame game, and seeing what we've seen of Notre Dame now. Ohio State has a lot of more work to do than I think we thought they did. Let's see how they continue on during the season. But Jay, the team who the Big Ten usually plays in bowls, which won't be happening too much longer, the Pac-12 actually had a good week.
Yeah. As most of you who regularly follow this show know, I've been getting crap from the rabbi and our pal Sean Roman for years about the relevance.
And by the way, and Joe Tafaro, who lives in California.
Fair enough. But for with you and Sean, it's been going on longer. Or about the relevance, or in their minds, the lack thereof of the Pac-12 in general and USC in particular. Some of it's deserved, especially regarding USC during the Clay Helton era. We talked about it in our college football preview about what Lincoln Riley changing his colors from Sooner Red to Trojan Cardinal would mean for this program in terms of both this season and long term. We knew that the offense was likely to improve with the acquisitions via the transfer portal of Riley's former Sooner quarterback Caleb Williams, former do-it-all Oregon running back Travis Dye, and former Pittsburgh wide receiver Jordan Addison, who's the reigning Biletnikoff winner. But I doubt that even the most optimistic Trojan fan, such as our pal Steve Ferguson, could have seen this explosion coming. USC has scored 40-plus points in 3 straight games to open the season. The last time USC scored 40-plus points in any 3-game stretch was 2017. Last time they did it to start the season was 2005. And what happened in 2005? All right, they won the national title. Riley's 2021 Oklahoma team scored 40-plus points 6 times all of last season. Now, the Alex Grinch defense was the unit that was going to be cause for concern. They make the plays, get the stops, and get off the field to give the ball back to the offense. So far, so good. They allowed Rice 0 points in the second half of the Trojans' 66-14 win, giving up only 280 total yards while notching 4 picks and 4 sacks. In the 41-28 win over Stanford conference game, the Trojans took their foot off the gas, managing just 2 field goals in the second half after putting up 35 in the first. Defense allowed 14 fourth quarter points to make the final score respectable, but they notched another 2 picks and 2 fumble recoveries along with 5 sacks. Fresno State was supposed to be the big early season test before USC really got into conference play. Bulldogs made it a contest through the first 30 minutes as USC was only up 21-10 at the half, but the air kind of went out of the tires of the Fresno State offense when quarterback Jake Hayner went down. Bulldogs managed to get it as close as 28-17, but then the Trojans scored 17 unanswered to close out the 45-17 win. Caleb Williams continued his masterful play, going 25 of 37. It's a little under 68% completion, 284 yards, 2 scores through the air, 2 more on the ground. Running backs Travis Dye and Austin Jones each topped 100 yards rushing. First time that's happened since 2018. And Addison found the end zone for the 5th time through the first 3 games, something that hasn't happened since 05. Defense only managed 3 sacks, didn't notch a turnover. The thing that's most concerning is that USC's defense has struggled mightily against the run. They've given up an average of 177 yards per game and 4.8 yards carry on the ground, including 221 to Stanford. This is something that I expect conference opponents to try and use to their advantage, try and win the time of possession game and keep the Trojans offense off the field. Grinch will need to address this as the rate of sacks. They're tied for number 2 in the nation with 14, and turnovers the defense is racking up, tied for number 4 in the nation with 10, is not sustainable, as is the Trojans continuing to jump on teams early to the tune of 87-38 point differential so far and not looking back. Not having to play number 15 Oregon or number 18 Washington will help, but the always troublesome Oregon State Beavers await on Saturday, and a road trip to number 13 Utah looms on October 15th. So the defense will have to step up their game if USC wants to keep its number 7 ranking, let alone improve on it. Speaking of those 3 other ranked teams, how about the Pac-12 having 4 teams in the top 25 and having multiple wins over top 15 teams? Kind of nice to see the conference's footprints all over the top 25 again.
Oregon beating BYU on Saturday being one of those, and Washington destroying Michigan State. I like how Jay mentioned a USC over Fresno State game, more important than those other 2 things. But I do have to say Washington did look a lot more competent, and Oregon just ran into a buzzsaw in week 1. That week 1 buzzsaw was Georgia. And oh my God, I had originally thought that was going to fall off a little bit last year because you lose pretty much your entire defense. You have a little bit of a different offense. A couple of wide receivers went to the NFL. You do have your tight end back, and you do have Stinson Bennett back. Okay, they might make the college football playoff, but I didn't think that was a guarantee. You guys did, and you thought it wasn't even close that they were in the top 3. And now we know it's not even close that they're the best team in the country overall so far. They won their first game 49-3 against that same Oregon team that I just mentioned, which is now currently 15th in the country, who just beat a BYU team who beat Baylor. And again, this begins with a Georgia team winning 49-3 at a technical neutral site. It was really a home game for them at the Chick-fil-A. What does it? Seriously. And of course, they followed it up with a 33-0 win over Samford. Big deal. But then they won on the road in the SEC 48-7 over South Carolina, leading Shane Beater to be pretty much a jerk, shooing women who were celebrating Title IX off of the field during the second half. What can I say? The Georgia defense was dominant last year, historically good, pretty much only giving up single digits a game. And now the defense, which is a little bit different this year, has followed up by giving up a grand total of 10 points through the first 3 games of this season. And with Kent State, Missouri, Auburn, and Vandy on the schedule before the gauntlet of Florida and Tennessee, both ranked at 20 and 11 respectively. How about Tennessee almost being a top 10 team? They play Florida this week. Georgia might not hit the giving up 40-point margin until Halloween, because that's how good this team has been defensively again. Yeah. Big names on that side.
Yeah.
The real story for me is, I hate college football for doing this, 6th-year quarterback Stinson Bennett, who was seen pretty much as a game manager last year, and basically the guy who was keeping the seat warm for, as we have to contractually mention USC multiple times on all shows that we talk college football, former USC transfer JT Daniels. But Bennett kept the job, and even though he looked pedestrian at times, most specifically in their first loss of the season in the SEC championship against Alabama, he followed it up with a national championship, performing very well, especially in the fourth quarter against Alabama. And while some people coast on a national championship and don't really improve their skill set, Stetson might be actually ready to go to the NFL because he's at 952 yards, 72% passing, which is something he was not even close to being able to do last year, and has 8 touchdowns, 5 in the air and 3 on the ground. Stetson Bennett is right now currently in top 5 Heisman voting nominees. So, but the usual suspects. It's basically Jalen, Caleb Williams, and CJ Stroud. All of them are having great years. Jalen Hurts. Oh my God. Bryce Young. I'm sorry.
Right.
I got Jalen Hurts on my mind because Philadelphia is a fucking beast right now on in the NFL. But it's been those 3. But I think Stetson Bennett has really done a good job putting himself in the conversation of not being a game manager anymore. And if Georgia's offense can do more than what they did last year, they're going back to the college football playoff. They're probably going back as a 1 seed this time, not a 3 seed. And they will be, along with Alabama, co-favorites to possibly win the national championship. I see a possibility of LA being the next Georgia-Alabama matchup. Of course, Atlanta first, LA next. But
yeah,
hopefully win the bowl.
Of course, how many years? 6?
10 points in the first 3 games.
Yeah, I'm talking about Bennett. 6 years, right?
6 years, yes. COVID year transfer, and I think he probably had a transfer.
COVID and red shirt.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
red shirt. The COVID year game.
Hey, look, he just proved you can be the old guy on campus and cool again. It went for Chris Winkie. Why not him?
Why not? But can we give some special consideration? Can we give a shout out and give some love to the University of Kentucky? Nobody saw this coming except those guys. And I said this before, and I'll say it again. Kentucky may not just be a basketball school any longer. That football team is playing.
Yeah. You know what?
SEC East, by the way, 4 teams in the top 20,
including
Kentucky. How about App State? I mean, they've been a great story.
Has anybody had a better 3 weeks than these guys? I mean,
2 weeks. They did lose to North Carolina in the first game.
Right, but I mean, talk about a dramatic. That was one hell of a dramatic game in UNC to kind of kick off the season. I mean, and then they win at home, and then they go on the road and practice and have a Hail Mary. I mean, that was a hell of a play.
They won on the road at Texas. They won on the road at Texas A&M, who was number 6 team in the country.
Jimbo Fisher.
Yeah.
And with College Game Day, on their campus to have that kind of a game, man. I mean, you got to be the residents of Boone, North Carolina, have got to be loving college football right now.
By the way, Kansas and Duke play each other this week in college football. They're both 3-0. Kansas is 3-0. Again, This is not a drill. The Kansas Jayhawks, who had an over-under of 2.5 wins on Vegas lines this year, are 3-0. Jay, give you before we go, let's do a couple of things. But Jay, give your shout outs.
Yeah, I want to give some congrats to my all-time favorite WNBA player, Becky Hammond, leading the Las Vegas Aces to the WNBA championship in her first year on the bench. A lot of criticism was thrown her way because of the salary that Aces and Raiders owner Mark Davis gave her to take over the team from Bill Laimbeer, with his blessing, by the way. But she didn't let that noise bother her. She just did her job, putting all the lessons she learned as an assistant to Greg Popovich to good use, and showing everyone in the WNBA what every San Antonio Spur already knew. Becky Hammond is a hell of a basketball coach. Congrats on the chip, Becky.
And Mark, by the way, first of all, the Aces are basically the female version of the Warriors now. They shoot every time they have a 3, they're pretty much going to make it in. And how about Mark Davis yesterday? Celebrating on the court. He was there for the post-trophy ceremony with Las Vegas. I hope nobody told him what happened at Allegiant Stadium an hour and a half later on. I hope he was celebrating and it will enjoy the stuff on the Strip tomorrow. I hope he still doesn't know that his team is currently right now 0-2 after blowing a 20 to 9.
I mean, it's hungover.
Let's just hope Mark Davis's face is already frozen, just stays frozen in time. Shout out, by the way, because probably on the next time we do this show, Aaron Judge is probably going to be the American League all-time home run hitter. 59 home runs. Why? I don't know why anyone pitches to him. He is one, and with all the talk we've had this year, he's literally one batting average point away from currently in possession of that triple crown. Just amazing stuff from Aaron Judge this year. There is no player who has ever had a better walk season in any history than Aaron Judge. And a special shout out, Anthony, to the New York Mets, who clinched their first playoff spot in 6 years tonight by beating the Milwaukee Brewers. And more importantly, Max Scherzer, the only thing that could stop him tonight was Buck Showalter yanking him in the sixth inning after throwing 6 perfect innings. It'll be very interesting to see the Mets down the stretch. And yes, we know Mets fans, the Braves also won. You're going to be a 100-win team, and you still might have to play in a wild card round. It's kind of annoying, but them's the breaks, unfortunately. Ask the Dodgers how that felt last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Atlanta Braves are the buzzsaw right now.
They're both, honestly, Anthony, they're both buzzsaws. They just had some hiccups, especially the Cubs series, but they're just that. They're hiccups. And again, there's just a lot of stuff to talk about. We will talk about baseball next time, but that will do it for us tonight. With Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait alongside me, I'm Stephen Rabinowitz. We'll see you next week as we do our race for October, hunt for October, so to speak, for a baseball-oriented edition of On the Sports Lines. YouTube.com/On the Sports Lines on demand, Facebook.com/On the Sports Lines live. And since I'm about to malfunction, Jay,
our Twitter handle is at ONTH Sports Lines, where you will see a link to this show at some point tomorrow. And keep an eye on it, because throughout the days, the weeks, I put up things that are interesting in the world of sports that I believe is worth your time to give a read to.
As long as they're not Steelers related, I'm all right. All right. For everybody here on the Sports Lines, we'll see you next time.
Good night, everybody.
Everyone.